Okay, the last time I was messing with the Autel's follow mode, I was thoroughly impressed. This time, I'm gonna drag it out and see if I can break this thing, which I did.
You lose. Perfect.
But I wanted to find out how many other ways I can break the follow mode. Now, DJI's Mavic Air 2 is set to come out pretty soon, and they're touting the new Active Follow 3.0, which we can't test yet, but I will be testing the dynamic mode on the Autel drone in the meantime to see what I can do with it. Now, on this day, it is incredibly windy, and I think that is the Achilles heel of trying to use the follow mode. Having too much wind gives too many variables to the dynamic follow mode. I did find out that you cannot shoot in any of the other resolutions. Anytime I changed to 8K, it defaulted to 4K 30. If I tried HD, it defaulted to 4K 30, which is a bummer. I mean, I guess it's understandable, but I really wish I could shoot in the higher resolution, or the, man, if you could do 120 frames a second, that would be silly awesome, but apparently you cannot. This feels a little bit like the camera in Super Mario 64, where sometimes it figures out a good angle, but then often you're fighting with it a lot to try to get something that works smoothly. So here, there's a couple of really skinny branches that I thought for sure it'd wipe out on. It lifts up to that, dodges it at the last second. That was really close to being a crash. And here, when I turn right, it does a pretty good job of following, as long as you're not going too fast. The change in lighting doesn't seem to be a problem for it. And I was very hesitant to go onto the road part because there's too many power lines. But underneath the trees, there's a lot of trees, a lot of dangling things. It figures out a pretty good path, which is impressive. Turning into the park, it does a pretty good job of following me, which is nice. It'd be cool to have a mode where if you're skating or carving like that, which would be what you'd be doing if you're snowboarding, that it didn't try to follow immediately, so that it could be a little bit smoother. Wanted to test this one out, go underneath the roof where it loses GPS signal. It's also much darker, and it seems to be handling it quite nicely. But I certainly did notice how poorly the Evo 8K handles shadows. It really seems to handle the highlights well, but anything in the shadows just gets lost completely. When you put it to -2 on the contrast, it artificially lifts the shadows. It doesn't retain any detail. It just kind of lifts the shadows, which is no good. It's ugly. So -1, maybe the best you can do as far as the contrast controls. Here I wanted to test it out to see what it would do if I am skating straight at it. It does a really good job. At first it's heading straight to this tree. I thought for sure it was going to hit the tree, but it diverts itself at the last second. You can see the tree, and I know it's going to hit the pavilion again, which is why I'm smiling. And here's the real test. How can it recognize wires? And these wires are a little bit easier to see since they have the cafe bulbs hanging. If you're going slow, no problem. It recognizes them and it dodges them. But when you're going slow, that's one thing. So I decided to speed it up a little bit more and see what happens when I go full speed at these things.
Round 2. You lose.
It definitely cannot see the wires in time.
Perfect.
So, little concerned, but picked it back up, pulled the dirt and the grass out of the motors, and it's back up and running. No harm done. So, I figured if I'm beating it up, I might as well beat it up a little bit more and see what can happen. So, even with all this terrible wind, it's still quite a stable picture, which is really nice. Why don't I go through a bunch more trees and see how it responds? It really seems to handle it quite well, and once you adjust the picture profile, I think it gives a pretty good picture color-wise out of it. But if you really look at what the 4K image looks like, it's not good when you go into the background. The picture just falls apart. The bitrate must be too low. And when I start to do carving, the camera just doesn't know how to handle it. So I don't know who rides a skateboard purely in a straight line, but it certainly makes it difficult to use if you do any sort of carving. So it tries to catch up, and it actually overshoots me and then forgets where I'm at. So it couldn't handle that mode. So I have to recenter it and bring myself back to it and run that same route that I ran earlier. This is me considering going on the road. It's not going to happen. Too many wires. So we're going to take it easy. I'm going to go extra slow because I would rather not crash it onto the sidewalk. So we're going to take our time. It does a pretty good job of tracking, as you see here. This is the same path I took earlier with an easy right turn. Easy right turn. And it totally loses track of me. Don't know why this time, but I was surprised by it. It must have something to do with the wind, because the wind is going pretty heavy here. And it can't lock on again. You got to get real close to get it to lock back on, which is somewhat of an annoyance that you've got to bring it all the way back in to figure out where you are again. And again, even doing slow carving, it can't anticipate where I'm going to go, so it makes for some sloppy camera work. And even just that, I lost it again. What a pain in the butt. It really has to be close to you, real close to you, in order to maintain that lock. So, relocked it on myself again, and we're going to get going. And I'm going pretty slow. I'm not sure what's causing it to lose track of me. Too many obstacles, too much wind. But even here, it's just a little bit too far away. And instead of going to catch up, it just loses track of me again. It just can't handle this particular distance. It's got to be really close up on you in order to maintain tracking. I'm going to back it back up and bring it, tilt it down a little bit. Give it a new target. This time locked on much closer. There it goes. Pushing it backward again. There's no specific mode to tell it to stay in front of you. It's just figuring that part out on its own. So I'm going to give it something to do by just going in circles and see what it looks like. So it really has a hard time maintaining an even distance. It's not very good at figuring out patterns. Let's run down this path again and see if it maintains. I'm going to go a little bit slower. The drone's going to fly a little bit lower than it did last time, and I'm much closer to the drone. See if it can hang on. So it gets a little caught up in these trees, but navigates around it, no problem. And it just loses me again there for unknown reasons. Don't know why. Don't know why it just lost me again. I wonder if it has to do with my crash. I don't know if there's just not enough contrast in the color, or if it's too windy. Unsure. And again, trying to maintain here with a little bit further distance from the drone, and the drone just does not like that. The second I get from behind that tree, the second I move a little bit further away, it loses track. It can't handle that distance. So the only way it really tracks you is if it's much, much closer. So in an open field, I'm going to set it up and then drive straight at it again and see if it decides on where to go. Does a pretty good job of going straight back. And that's impressive. So I'm going to turn left here and see how it responds and how it adjusts its course. No problem. Seems to be good. Catches on and then zooms in to catch up, and then I turn left and for some reason it just loses track again. I wonder if it has to do with my crash. There was no physical damage, so I don't think so. But I think it has much more to do with the wind. If you want to see more videos like this, do like and subscribe. The next video I'm going to do is going to be an unfair comparison, comparing a Red 8K versus the Autel Drone 8K, just so you can see what the differences look like. So thanks for watching. I'll talk to you guys soon.